Hello everyone, I'm MVL, and in this video we're going to be doing a collection guide for the Xbox 360. We're going to look at the console accessories and show 10 games you can get for under £15 and show gameplay footage for them. This is the cheapest HDMI console and a great system to pick up and start collecting. So without further ado, let's get started. Now the Xbox 360 does have less exclusive than the PlayStation 3, but its games are often cheaper, and unlike the PlayStation 3, its HDMI output doesn't have copy protection. So if you're planning to stream or record, the console is a lot easier to do so. Plus, at least at the time of this video, unlike the PS3 or the Wii for that matter, the Xbox 360's online content is still available. So certain games that feel incomplete without downloadable content can still be done. For example, with Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, half of the game is DLC. Though I do advise using an Ethernet connection, as the Xbox 360 doesn't like some of the current wireless connections. Sometimes the console may connect to online but doesn't actually download anything without a wired connection. Speaking of wires, let's talk about how to connect your console. If you happen to have a widescreen CRT, you can actually connect with component cables and at 720, which is a great way to experience the console. Though for PAL users, I will say that there are a few games that don't support the PAL 50Hz format. Flat screen users are in luck, as the console connects directly to HDMI, though I do advise setting the output of the Xbox 360 to 720 regardless. Basically, all the games on the console are 720 or lower oddball resolutions, and the console will upscale them to 1080 if you use that setting. I found this can sometimes cause screen issues, especially with capture cards while recording. If your TV handles 720 fine, it will be better to use this setting, and that's what I recommend. And if you're finding some games are too quiet, especially voices, I recommend setting the audio output to stereo, and that might help. As well as a massive library of Xbox 360 games, the console can also play certain original Xbox games. Compatibility lists can be found online, and if you do upgrade to the current generation Xbox, some original Xbox and 360 games also work with that console using a cloud-based service. Now before we move on to games and gameplay footage, I want to mention a few detriments to Xbox 360 collecting. Firstly, modern consoles aren't built to last. You may have heard of the famous red ring issue for Xbox 360s and yellow rings for PlayStation 3s. Here's my NES, which is almost as old as I am. Sure, I've changed the cartridge loader, but it was made in 1987 and it still works. Here is my previous Xbox 360e model, which I bought new and it only lasted 4 years. Simply put, modern systems overheat and aren't constructed or designed to last. The only plus side is that, at least on the Xbox 360, the online content can still be re-downloaded, and you can always pick up a new console since they're very cheap at around £20 to £30. Also, just before we look at the games and gameplay video, I want to talk about the name of the console. And it's not like other companies haven't had silly names. Even Nintendo isn't safe with the confusing Wii U and of course the new 3DS. But Xbox 360, what does it mean? Well, Microsoft's previous first console was the Xbox, and it was only named that because around 2000 marketing said things with X in the name sell better. When the next generation consoles came, Microsoft had a problem. It couldn't put an Xbox 2 alongside a PlayStation 3. Xbox wanted to be numerically better. Technically, the Xbox 360 is supposed to be called the Xbox Revolution, and 360 is shorthand for 360 degrees, pronounced 360 like that's free but 60 more than the PlayStation 3. But wait, it gets worse than that. They called their next console the Xbox One. Technically, that was supposed to be called the Xbox All-in-One because it's a media device as well as a gaming console. This is why we call the first Xbox the original Xbox, not forgetting there was a console revision for the Xbox One. So this is an original Xbox, and this is an original Xbox One. And after that, this happened. We got the Xbox One X revision, and then the Xbox Series X, which came after it. Anyway, moving on. As I mentioned, the games for Xbox 360 are often cheaper than PlayStation 3 games. Sony used their own more expensive Blu-ray format, and Microsoft continued to use DVD. Many PS3 games need to be installed to run because of the disc reading speed of the format, but most Xbox 360 games can run right off the disc. though you can also install them if you want, especially if your Xbox 360 has allowed disk drive. One cool accessory you can get for the Xbox 360 is the HD DVD player, which is the format Microsoft backed during the format war of the time. This exclusively plays HD DVDs, and it can't be used for anything else. And HD DVDs were also the fastest media to succumb to disk rot, so I guess it's a good thing that nobody owned any anyway. The 360 did have some good extras though, like the Kinect, which you can use to play motion control games, like Fable the Journey and Rise of Nightmares. Now, let's look at some games. A lot of games, like LA Noire and Skyrim, have been released on current systems, but you can get them a lot cheaper on the Xbox 360. Some games, like Grand Theft Auto 5, were also released on more than one disc because they were released on DVDs. With that said, here are 10 Xbox 360 games and gameplay footage, and each of these games is under £15. First up, Alan Wake. This is a psychological thriller and action game, which you can find at the excellent price of £5. This game has an intriguing and engaging horror story, which is akin to a Stephen King novel. There are also inspirations taken from The Twilight Zone and Twin Peaks as well. The gameplay is very story-driven and action-orientated, with some puzzle and platforming elements thrown in as well. If you are able to take advantage of the Xbox Marketplace still being there in the future, I'd also advise on checking out the 2 additional downloadable episodes, The Writer and The Signal, as well as the standalone follow-up game, Alan Wake's American Nightmare, which is only downloadable and didn't get a physical release on the Xbox 360. This is also one of many games that does have a modern remaster, but you can get it cheaper and experience the original version on the Xbox 360. Next up, I'm going to cheat and include 3 games from the same series. We have Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, and Batman Arkham Origins. These are all fantastic action-adventure games, which you can pick up individually for around £5 each. I think they're all great, and it'd be tough for me to pick between them, and since I could only fit so many games on this list, I decided to feature them all. Just like LA Noire and The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, the Arkham games aren't exclusive to this console, but just like those games, I really do recommend picking them up. As I mentioned, I could only fit so many games on this list. Anyway, likewise to the aforementioned games, these games have also been remastered for modern systems, but the original Xbox 360 versions are still excellent, and what's more, they're very cheap to pick up. Arkham Asylum was the first entry into this series, pitting Batman against his iconic nemesis, the Joker, and other sinister villains. This game features beat-em-up style action, detective puzzle solving, and crazy platforming sections, setting the stage and developing the story for what would become a stunning series of games. Arkham City amped up the action from the first game and brought the series into an open-world environment, which allowed the gameplay to be more free-flowing, allowing more exploration and secrets to be found throughout the game. What's more is that you can also play as Catwoman in this game as well. This game also had story DLC with Harley Quinn's Revenge, which is set after the main game story. If you can get the Game of the Year edition, this bonus content will be included on the disc, so I advise getting that version of the game. Arkham Origins is more of the same, which really isn't a bad thing. If you loved Arkham City, I imagine you'll really like Arkham Origins as well. This game did have DLC, and although it did get a Game of the Year release, the extra content was only provided with a download code rather than being on the disc. I recommend downloading the Cold Cold Heart single player add-on story content if you can, where you get to face off against a chilling adversary, Mr. Freeze. Next up we have Blue Dragon. This is a role-playing game, which you can procure for just £5. It's a game which feels very Final Fantasy inspired, and in fact, music from this game was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, who is synonymous with the Final Fantasy soundtrack. This is a super fun and colourful turn-based RPG, and this game is a great representative of a genre that wasn't terribly prevalent on the Xbox 360. Like many RPGs, this game is big, with lots of skills to develop as you progress, and a ton of areas to explore and enemies to do battle with. Unlike many other games on this list, which over time were released elsewhere, Blue Dragon actually remained an exclusive, and was only ever released on the Xbox 360. But it did get 2 follow-up games, Blue Dragon Plus and Blue Dragon Awakened Shadow, and those games were only released on the Nintendo DS handheld. Next up we have the Dead Rising Collection. These are zombie-themed action-adventure games. You can get Dead Rising 1 or 2 for around £8 each, but if you're willing to spend a little more, you can get the Dead Rising Collection, which also includes the alternate version of Dead Rising 2 Off the Record, where you play as Frank West from the first game instead of the second game's main character, Chuck Green. There are also the digital-only Dead Rising 2 expanded content inclusions of Dead Rising 2 Case Zero, which is a prequel, and Dead Rising 2 Case West, which takes place after the main story. If you can get that digitally distributed only standalone content, I do recommend it. And I will also say that games in this series were remastered on modern consoles, but the previous digital exclusives were still never released physically at all. If you love chopping down The Walking Dead, you'll be right at home with Dead Rising. Completing the story as you play is entirely optional, so you really can do whatever you want within the playtime limit. There's a leveling system, and even if you fail the story mode first time and get a bad ending, you can take your experience into the next playthrough and be powered up for that. Dead Rising 2 expands upon the original gameplay. Frank West's camera is gone, but Chuck Green can combine weapons together to make more deadly devices. The idea of breakable weapons and combining weapons together might make you think about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch, but it was done here first, and whilst not new, is a prevalent mechanic in the Dead Rising games. There's more of everything in this game. More weapons, more activities, and more minigames, and a larger environment to battle the undead. Next up, I'm once again going to cheat and include 3 games from the same series with Dead Space, Dead Space 2, and Dead Space 3. These are science fiction themed survival horror games, which you can find individually for around £5. And this is another game series that has post-game story DLC, which is only available online, with Dead Space 2 Severed and Dead Space 3 Awakened. And I will also note that all of these Dead Space games are playable from the disc via the cloud-based playability on the Xbox One as well. And at this time, the Dead Space 2 Severed DLC is exclusively available on the Xbox Online Marketplace. Dead Space is a fantastic horror game that has a great blend of action, puzzles, and suspense. There's jump scares ready to chill you to the bone before throwing you into endless streams of maniacal monsters, then massive boss battles. Finding new tools and powerful weapons to aid you as you go. You can also upgrade your equipment, armor, and weapons as you progress to even the odds against that which waits in the darkness beyond. Dead Space 2 learns from the first game well, whereas platforming zero-gravity sections from the first game were more restrictive, you can now more freely move around in the Dead Space. The pacing of this game is simply amazing, moving seamlessly from one section to the next, leaving you always wanting to play a little more, to see what happens next or what might be lurking in wait around the corner. This game is so big, being on DVD format on the Xbox 360, that this game is on 2 discs, so make sure you have both of them if you grab this game. Dead Space 3 took things in a different direction, and some of the story content is only doable playing cooperative multiplayer, and what's more is that co-op multiplayer can only be done online, and not locally on the same console. There's still a lot to like about this game though, with inspirations from Alien and The Thing being prevalent in the story and style. but a lot has changed in this game that wasn't broken or needed fixing from the earlier titles. Still, for the price you can find this game for, it's certainly worth picking up to complete the story of another 2-disc horror adventure. I am once again going to cheat and show 3 games from the same series with Fable Anniversary, Fable 2, and Fable 3. These are iconic action role-playing games, each of which you can find for around £4. Fable Anniversary is a remake of the first Fable game, which came out on the original Xbox, and includes some of its DLC on disc as well. And this visually polished masterpiece helps prove why the original game was so well received in its time, setting the foundations which would be built upon both in terms of gameplay and controls for the next installments of the series. The original game was ahead of its time, and I'd like to think that this version has aged like a fine wine, tasting better with age. Fable 2 makes a lot of improvements. You have much more character options to play with and a far bigger game world to traverse, and the controls have been improved as well. The game also leans further into the morality of a hero in the story, allowing you to become a champion of truth and justice or a devil of dark dealings and underhanded acts. You are also introduced to a dog companion, which will become a mainstay gimmick in this series going forward. Fable 2 also had a Game of the Year edition which included some DLC on disc, so I'd recommend picking that version up if you get the chance. Fable 3 is another great game, making further refinements to the controls which lets the gameplay flow much more freely. You are back in the action as a descendant of a previous hero with a tall task ahead of yourself and your happy-go-lucky dog cohort. The game also has some great recognizable voices, with the likes of Stephen Fry, Simon Pegg, and John Cleese providing dialogue in this game. Next up we have Gears of War. This is a third-person shooter, which you can find for only £3. It's another game which has been made available anew on modern systems, but you can get the original on the Xbox 360 for a great price. Gears of War was pretty much an auto-include on this list for an Xbox exclusive experience, and whilst this game by no means invented the cover-based shooter, it's definitely popularized it at the time, with many games cloning the gimmick and Gears of War itself becoming a popular franchise going forward. Next up we have Halo Anniversary. This is a first-person shooter, which you can get for around £6. Narrowing down a list of games for this video was no easy task, but I know I'd be remiss if I didn't include another iconic Xbox franchise like Halo. Halo Anniversary is a remake of the first Halo game from the original Xbox, which was another instant classic from its time, which spawned many similar games and sequels to itself. Halo has an excellent single-player story with impressive visuals upgraded on this version, going along with a lengthy campaign to enjoy which features multiple weapons to employ and vehicles to ride. But one of the biggest strengths of Halo is that it is also an amazing game for local multiplayer. Taking inspiration from GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, you have a variety of multiplayer game modes you can experience, and with a good group of friends you really can't go wrong. Additionally, Halo Anniversary also lets you switch between the remade graphics for the Xbox 360 version of this game and graphics in the style of the original Xbox version, and I wish more remakes included this ability. It's a really cool extra feature. Next up we have Red Dead Redemption. This is an action-adventure western game, which you can find for around £7. This game has a vast world to explore, filled with missions, weapons, and minigames for you to enjoy. You can ride your horse as a noble force for good, or play this game like you're one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The choice is yours. Regardless of your playstyle, there's plenty of enjoyment and activity to be found in this game, both good, bad, and ugly. And for some zombie fun in the Western genre, I also recommend picking up Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare, which follows on from the main game story. This was sold as a standalone game, and you can also pick it up as a double pack with the main game as the Game of the Year edition. And finally we have the Orange Box. IGN described this as the best deal in gaming history. You get Half-Life 2 as well as the extra episodes 1 and 2, and Portal and Team Fortress 2 for £13. Granted, by the time of this video, Team Fortress 2, which is an online multiplayer game, may not be playable due to the online server's availability it requires. But even without that, you get some of the best games of all time included. Half-Life 2 is a first-person shooter that was so ahead of its time, I think if it was released right now, you'd think it was a brand new game. From the vast and varied gameplay that dips into many genres, from racing action to suspenseful horror to the incredible physics from the source engine that this game uses, the gameplay is incredible. Following up a timeless game like the first Half-Life wasn't easy, but Valve struck gold with this follow-up. If it wasn't an incredible game by itself, the extra game episodes 1 and 2 are also on the disc. Portal is also included, and it's a first-person puzzle game that is just as addicting as it is engagingly brilliant in its design. Largely using the namesake portals, you are put up against a series of puzzling and testing tasks that ramp up in complexity and difficulty as you progress through the game. With every completed puzzle, the intriguing story continues to play out as you go. Just like Half-Life 2, Portal would do just as well as a standalone game, but you can grab a great package including it and other games with the unmatched value of the Orange Box. Well, there you have it. Thanks for checking out this buying guide for the Xbox 360. I hope it helped you get a better look at this console and collecting for it. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a like or comment to let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. And if you'd like to, you can also support me through Patreon or YouTube channel membership. Thank you for watching. I've been MVL, and I will catch you next time.